You're out. The words hit harder than I expected. Like a punch I didn't see coming. My name's Marlo Quinn, 30 years old, founder of Echelon Analytics, and until 15 seconds ago, I was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing AI firms in Austin, Texas. Now I was standing across from Kai Donovan, my childhood best friend turned investor, watching him lean back in the same chair I used to sit in. He looked right at home in the power seat, like he'd been planning this moment for weeks, maybe months. The boardroom was silent, except for the gentle hum of the AC and the soft click of Kai's Montblanc pen as he tapped it against the conference table. The glass walls around us shimmered with Texas sunlight, casting long shadows across the floor. "You brought this on yourself, Marlo," Kai said, voice cool and even. "The board agrees." I didn't say anything. Not yet. My fingers curled slightly at my side, nails digging into my palm. I looked down at the stack of papers in front of me, board resolutions, share reassignments, a formal notice of termination from the company I built from a folding table in a downtown co-working space. 6 years. Countless sleepless nights. 17-hour days. Every line of code in our first prototype had come from my hand. Every client pitch, every sleepless investor meeting, every failed version of the algorithm, me. Now I was being cut out with the elegance of a scalpel and the cruelty of a betrayal. "I trusted you," I said quietly. Kai didn't flinch. "And you got your company off the ground because of me. Let's not rewrite history." His tone was clipped, surgical. Like he was already talking about me in the past tense. I took a slow breath and looked around the boardroom. The walls were lined with white boards scribbled with diagrams I drew. The massive touchscreen near the corner still had my handwriting on it, client segmentation analysis from last week's sprint. None of it mattered now. "You couldn't have done this without the other board members," I said. "What did you promise them?" Kai smirked. "Stability. Growth. A CEO who knows how to play the game." "Meaning what?" "Someone who does what you say." "That's exactly what I don't want," he said smoothly. "I want someone who doesn't self-sabotage, who doesn't challenge the board every time they want change." "You were becoming volatile." I stared at him. "I was protecting the company." "No," he said. "You were protecting your ego." Silence. Outside the conference room, I could see my team through the glass. Dozens of engineers, product leads, interns, all working like nothing had changed. Because they didn't know yet. "I gave up everything to build this," I said. "You just stole it." Kai stood up, slowly straightening his cufflinks. He didn't look angry. He looked satisfied. Like a man checking off the final box on a long checklist. "We'll have HR process your severance," he said. "You'll be escorted out by security in 10 minutes. Please don't make a scene." I should have shouted. I should have thrown the damn chair through the window. Instead, I nodded once. I walked out of the boardroom, my heartbeat loud in my ears. 2 security guards fell into step behind me like shadows. My walk to the elevator felt endless. Every person who passed me avoided eye contact. Whispers started before I even reached my office. I didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them watch. I packed up 6 years of my life in a cardboard box. My first Echelon hoodie, a Polaroid from our beta launch, a worn-out copy of the Lean Startup. The glass plaque that said, Founder of the Year 2022 went in last. My hands didn't shake. But my brain was screaming. Kai thought this was over. He thought he'd won. That he could push me out, take what I built, and keep the empire for himself. He didn't know what I knew. Didn't know I'd already seen the signs weeks ago. That I'd backed up every document, every Slack thread, every shady memo he thought I wouldn't notice. Didn't know I had receipts. As I walked past the front desk and stepped into the Texas heat, the sun hit my face like a spotlight. The parking lot shimmered with afternoon glare, my old Civic tucked between 2 Teslas. I dropped the box in the trunk and slammed it shut. My phone buzzed. A text from Sadie, our lead developer. He blindsided all of us. What the hell happened? Another buzz. This time from Levi, our marketing head. You okay? They told us you stepped down. I turned off the screen and pocketed the phone. No. I didn't step down. I was shoved out. But they'd learn soon enough. This wasn't the end. Not even close. 3 days after Kai forced me out, I was still waking up at 5:30 a.m. Muscle memory. 6 years of building something from nothing didn't just fade overnight. But this time, instead of heading into the Echelon office, I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. No calls to make. No roadmap to update. Just one folder on my desktop labeled Failsafe. Inside that folder were weeks, months, of backup. Emails, contracts, internal memos, calendar events. And one folder labeled Donovan_takeover. I didn't start collecting this stuff because I expected betrayal. I started because I knew who Kai really was. We'd grown up together, but he had always craved control. In high school, he once borrowed my science fair idea and turned it into a pitch deck for a startup competition. He won $5,000 and didn't mention my name once. I forgave him. I always forgave him. But when Kai invested in Echelon 3 years ago, I should have known that loyalty had an expiration date. He came in promising resources, mentorship, connections. He brought those things, sure. But he also brought manipulation. Slow, quiet manipulation. It started with small requests: let me sit in on hiring interviews, let me revise the investor update. Then it became board seats, veto power, and influence over every big decision. I didn't notice the noose tightening until it was around my neck. And now, he had everything. Except one thing. He didn't know that I'd discovered something. Something he buried deep in our financial dashboard. A string of transactions from shell accounts. Consulting fees paid to third-party vendors that didn't exist 6 months ago. Almost $275,000 worth. I'd flagged it internally. Quietly. Asked Sadie to double-check the logs. Then I went further. I reached out to Micah Alcott, a security analyst I'd worked with back when we launched our AI compliance tools. Micah owed me a favor. He traced the vendors. Guess who they were registered to? A holding company in Nevada. Kai Donovan's name on the paperwork. He was siphoning company funds through fake vendor contracts, padded invoices, ghost developers. He wasn't just stealing control. He was stealing money. I hadn't gone to the authorities. Not yet. Back then, some part of me still believed we could fix it. That I could confront him, warn him, force him to come clean. That maybe there was still some version of the kid I used to ride bikes with down Maple Street, racing to the gas station for ice cream sandwiches. But the second he had security escort me out of my own company, that part of me died. Now I was building a case. And I wasn't doing it alone. That night, I met Sadie at a food truck lot just off South Congress. It was late, past 10. Neon lights flickered across the pavement, casting long shadows under the picnic tables. She showed up in a hoodie and jeans, baseball cap low over her eyes. "You sure we're not being watched?" she asked, half joking, but her eyes didn't smile. "I wouldn't put it past him," I said. We sat at a table near the back and opened our laptop. I passed her a USB drive. I found vendor payments, Crestridge Systems, and Mariner Loop. Do those names sound familiar? She blinked. Those were on Kai's approved contractor list. He said they were back-end consultants. "They're fake," I said. Micah traced the registrations. The LLCs were filed by a firm in Reno, same office used to set up tax shelters. Kai's name is buried under a trust, but it's him. He's been bleeding the company dry while grooming me as the fall guy. Sadie leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Jesus. Can you still access the Git repo?" I asked. "For now," she said. "They haven't revoked my admin rights. Yet. I need the commit history. Every merge, every IP. If we can prove that the code Kai claims credit for was pushed from my account, we can establish authorship." She looked at me. "You're not just trying to get back in, are you?" "No," I said. I'm trying to bury him. We sat there in silence for a moment, the air thick with fried oil and tension. A couple laughed loudly at the table next to us. It felt like another world. Then Sadie said something I'll never forget. You were the heart of that place, Marlowe. The rest of us just followed your rhythm. And now it's offbeat. He thinks replacing you was a smart business move. But it's already falling apart. I nodded. I just needed to know someone else saw it. I saw it, she said. She handed me a second flash drive. Backups of the server logs. Access history. Meeting notes. Kai's been sloppy lately. I stared at it. It felt heavy in my hand. Proof. Fuel. Justice. Maybe revenge. By the time I got home, it was close to midnight. I turned off my lights, closed the blinds, locked the door. Then I sat at my kitchen table, alone, with my laptop glowing and a flash drive full of fire. Kai Donovan thought he cut me out cleanly. But he'd left a wound wide open. And I was going to make sure it bled. By the next morning, I had a war plan. Not a perfect one, not yet. But enough to make Kai lose sleep. I spent hours going through the documents Sadie gave me. Most of it was technical. Server logs, repo history, admin permissions. But if you knew what to look for, it told a very human story. And that story was about theft. Kai hadn't just padded fake vendor contract. He was siphoning intellectual property too. Taking credit for features and back-end systems I had designed, lines of code I wrote, hours of brainstorming that lived in my whiteboard sketches. He'd been repackaging my vision as his own, presenting it to investors as the new direction, claiming he'd stepped in when I lost focus. The worst part? Some of them were buying it. I opened LinkedIn. Kai had already updated his bio. CEO of Echelon Analytics, restructured leadership, stabilized growth trajectory. Stabilized. The guy stole a company and called it stabilization. I needed help from someone outside the startup bubble, someone who didn't care about VC politics or who sat on which board. So I reached out to Delaney Chen, a tech journalist I'd met last year at a fintech conference in Chicago. She wrote for The Verge and had a reputation for gutting bad actors with scalpel-level precision. We met that afternoon at a bookstore cafe on 6th Street. She wore aviators and carried 2 phones. One for calls, the other constantly recording audio. You said this wasn't a tip, she said, sitting across from me. You said it was a story. It's both, I told her, handing over the second flash drive. But it's only part of it. The rest. I'm still collecting. Delaney plugged it into her tablet and scrolled through the folders. Why now? Because he pushed me too far, I said. Because it stopped being business and started being personal. And because if he's doing this here, he's probably done it before. Delaney arched a brow. You think there's a pattern? I don't think. I know. I pulled out a folder from my backpack and laid it on the table. Inside were printouts from a Nevada corporate registration database, plus a copy of an archived profile from Kai's last startup, Rivian Grid, where he'd served as COO for a short, mysterious stretch before it suddenly shut down. There were rumors, I said. Something about misappropriated funds. Nothing ever proved. But the founder walked away with a ruined reputation. Sound familiar? Delaney whistled low. This is good, she said. It's really good. But I need more than vendor shell companies. You want to burn someone like Kai Donovan? You need a body. Something undeniable. I nodded. I'm working on it. She looked me over. You're not sleeping, are you? Nope. You know this could get ugly? Yeah. That's the point. I left the cafe with adrenaline in my veins. For the first time since the boardroom ambush, I felt something like control returning. But I also knew Kai. I knew how he operated when he was cornered. He'd strike back. Fast. Hard. Quietly. And he wouldn't do it himself. Sure enough, that evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Houston area code. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. On the 4th call, I answered. Hello? Marlowe Quinn. Speaking. My name is Darren Cale, legal counsel for Echelon Analytics. This is official notice that your access to proprietary materials is under review. If you are in possession of company data, you are required to delete all copies immediately or face legal action. I smiled bitterly. There it was. The swing back. I see, I said calmly. Can you send that to me in writing? It's on its way. Click. 2 minutes later, an email popped into my inbox. A cease and desist. Vague legal threat. Typical corporate boilerplate, but it told me one thing. Kai knew I had something. He didn't know what. But it was enough to rattle him. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Sadie. They're trying to shake me. They're scared, she said. That's good. Any changes to your access? She paused. They revoked my GitHub keys this morning. I'm on probation, pending a restructure. I swore under my breath. They're moving fast. That's not all, she added. I pulled logs from the internal ticketing system. Kai's been deleting old tickets, ones tied to our early architecture discussions, ones that proved the core tech was yours. He's scrubbing the trail. Exactly. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. This is going to get worse before it gets better, I muttered. Sadie didn't disagree. You still want to do this? I looked at the USB on my desk. The folder named Failsafe, the screenshots, the Slack exports, the signatures on the vendor contracts. He tried to erase me, I said. Now I'm going to make damn sure he can't. The next morning, I drove to a place I hadn't been in over a decade. Boulder, Colorado. The mountains hadn't changed. Still towering, still indifferent. The roads were the same too. Winding, quiet, lined with houses that hadn't updated their siding since the early 2000s. But my purpose for being here was very different now. I wasn't here to visit my childhood home. I was here to dig into Kai's past. After everything I'd uncovered, the shell companies, the forged contracts, the erasure of my contributions, there was still one piece missing. Intent. I needed to prove this wasn't just corporate greed. It was a pattern, a habit, a strategy. And to do that, I had to talk to someone who knew what came before Echelon. Her name was April Morales, co-founder of Kai's first startup, Rivian Grid. She was the one who'd vanished from the tech scene 5 years ago without explanation. And I'd finally tracked her down through a burner LinkedIn profile and a mutual acquaintance. She agreed to meet in a coffee shop just outside town. She showed up wearing a long coat and dark glasses. Quiet, cautious, but not afraid. Her eyes were sharp, like someone who'd learned exactly what trust costs. You're Marlowe, she said. I've been waiting for this call for years. We sat down in the corner. I didn't bother with small talk. You co-founded Rivian Grid with Kai Donovan. She nodded. I did the infrastructure and product dev. He did the fundraising. We made a great team until the funding landed. Then everything changed. I leaned forward. What happened? She opened a folder in her bag and slid it across the table. Inside were old emails, pitch decks, wire transfers. Same pattern, she said. He created fake vendor invoices, funneled money to shell companies, claimed development delays to stall investors, and slowly pushed me out. Told the board I was overwhelmed, not ready for scale. Then filed paperwork that gave him controlling interest. My stomach twisted. I was looking at my own future just 5 years earlier. And the money? Gone. He drained $430,000 before the Series B collapse. Investors threatened a lawsuit, but he flipped it, told them I was the problem. I walked away to keep my name clean. Why didn't you go public? She looked me dead in the eyes. Because back then, no one believed a woman founder who accused a rising male star of financial misconduct. They called me bitter. Said I wasn't tough enough for the industry. I exhaled slowly. Kai wasn't an opportunist. He was a serial operator. Would you be willing to talk to a journalist? I asked. I already have, she said. Your friend Delaney called me last night. I blinked. You spoke to her? I did. She said you were building a case. And that you were serious. I am. Then let's end him properly. By the time I got back to my hotel, Delaney had already texted me. April confirms everything. I'm running background checks on the vendors now. This story is growing fast. Another text followed immediately after. Also, check this out. She sent a screenshot of a company called Grailpath Technologies, incorporated in Delaware just 2 weeks ago. Kai Donovan listed as executive chairman. New company? I texted. More like an escape pod. He was preparing for the exit. Just like April said. Build, bleed, abandon, rebrand. And now that I was out of Echelon, he was doing it again. Setting up the next grift before the current one even burned down. The rage hit me so fast I nearly knocked over my laptop. He wasn't just stealing companies. He was using them up, like batteries. And every single person who helped him build them? Collateral damage. I sat down hard, opened my laptop, and started recording. I recorded a statement. Laid out everything, my role, the documents, the code, the fraud. I didn't know if I'd ever use it, but I needed to say it all out loud in my own words. Because when this war was over, I wanted one thing to remain absolutely clear. I didn't lose. I was stolen from. 2 weeks after I was pushed out, I walked into a federal building with a manila envelope under my arm and a firestorm in my chest. Across from me sat Sasha Patel, a senior analyst for the SEC's Regional Enforcement Division. Mid-40s. Sharp, calm, no-nonsense. The kind of woman who didn't waste time with flattery or small talk. This is about Echelon Analytics, she said, flipping open the envelope. And your former partner, Kai Donovan. I nodded. Yes. I believe he's committed securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement through multiple shell entities, both inside Echelon and in previous ventures. Sasha sifted through the pages. Payment records, LLC filings, email threads, Slack exports, repo logs. I watched her eyes flicker over the details. I could see it. The exact moment the story changed from potential whistleblower to credible threat. She set the papers down. And you're prepared to testify under oath? I am. Do you have any reason to believe Mr. Donovan is preparing to flee or liquidate? I nodded. He's already incorporated a new holding company. He's laying the groundwork to exit Echelon, probably by the end of the quarter. Sasha pressed her fingertips together. If what you're saying is true, Mr. Quinn, this could open a multi-agency investigation. I know. Has he threatened you? Not directly. Indirectly. I hesitated, then pulled out my phone and handed it to her. A voice message I hadn't shared with anyone. A scrambled voice from a burner number 2 nights ago. You need to stop digging, Marlowe. Walk away while you still have options. You don't want this to get ugly. Sasha listened twice, then transferred it to her own phone. This changes things, she said. We're escalating. That night, I got the call from Delaney. He knows. About what? Everything. April. Me. The SEC. He's already gone dark on social media. Deleted half his online bios. You lit the fuse. Good, I said. Let it burn. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something about how fast he reacted. It meant he was preparing a counterattack. Sure enough, the next morning, I received a legal complaint via certified mail. Kai was suing me. Defamation. Breach of contract. Misuse of confidential company data. He was throwing the whole book, hoping something would stick or at the very least stall me. I read the packet cover to cover. He claimed I'd falsified documents, that I'd been mentally unfit for executive leadership, that I'd jeopardized investor trust and harmed brand integrity. There it was. He wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to erase me. He wanted to turn me into the unstable founder who couldn't handle growth, who lashed out when replaced. He was rewriting the narrative while I was still living it. I could almost hear his voice. Let him scream into the wind. No one believes the fired guy anyway. But this time I wasn't screaming alone. Because Delaney was publishing. That same night, The Verge ran the first piece. From Founder to Fallout, the curious case of Echelon Analytics. The article didn't accuse Kai directly. It didn't have to. It laid out the timeline, the vendor trail, the payments, April's testimony, my departure, my credentials. It was neutral, meticulous, devastating. Within hours, my phone blew up. Investors, engineers, 2 board members who hadn't returned my calls in weeks. Suddenly, they wanted answers. Suddenly, the silence cracked. Kai issued a statement on LinkedIn the next morning. Carefully crafted. Focused on disgruntled narratives and ambitious yet difficult transitions. He didn't mention me by name. He didn't have to. But the damage was done. The truth was out. Now it was time to finish what I started. Because one by one, the pieces were lining up. I had the motive. I had the trail. And now? Now I had momentum. 2 days after the article dropped, Kai Donovan vanished. No emails. No calls. His assistant told reporters he was traveling off-grid. His lawyer declined to comment. Classic move. He was running the playbook. Wait out the storm, go silent, re-emerge rebranded. But this wasn't a storm he could hide from anymore. Because behind the scenes, we weren't just building a case. We were preparing an ambush. It started with April. She handed over an old laptop, one Kai had used back at Rivian Grid. She never wiped it. Inside were archived messages, early schematics, and a paper trail of shell vendors and forged invoices going back nearly 7 years. Then Sadie got access to a staging server backup she'd quietly mirrored before they locked her out. Inside, metadata showing I authored 92% of Echelon's core product. Kai's contributions? 6 rewritten press releases and 1 staged demo video we'd filmed for investors. And then, Micah, the security analyst I'd hired weeks ago, called me. He sounded breathless. I just cracked one of the encrypted containers in your backups, he said. You're gonna want to see this. He sent me a folder of recordings, screen-captured Zoom meetings. Most looked normal, board updates, sprint reviews, roadmap check-ins. But one hit like a lightning bolt to the spine. It was dated 4 months before I was removed. Kai talking to another board member, Jasper Lin, late at night. Off the record. No agenda filed. I hit play. Look, we let Marlowe get it to MVP. But now? It's time to bring in someone real. Someone market-tested. You sure he won't go quietly? He won't have a choice. Once we push through the mental health narrative, no one'll touch him. I'll handle the equity. Just vote with me. I paused the video, hands shaking. They had planned this. Gaslight me. Strip my title. Rewrite the story. All while smiling to my face. Micah's voice came through again. This is your smoking gun. He was right. That one recording transformed everything. It wasn't just theft now. It was conspiracy. We sent it to Delaney. Within 12 hours, it hit the follow-up article. Leaked call suggests intentional ouster of Echelon founder. Board member heard discussing mental health narrative to undermine CEO. This time, it made national tech headlines. Fast Company. Bloomberg. Hacker News front page. Echelon's lead investor, Ariel Fletcher, pulled out the next morning. So did 2 clients. The company's valuation tanked by $38 million overnight. And then, the real blow landed. The SEC served a subpoena. Official notice of an investigation into suspected securities fraud, insider manipulation, and unlawful misrepresentation of founder performance in the context of shareholder dilution. In plain English, they were coming for Kai. By Friday, Echelon Analytics was in full damage control. They posted a letter to the community. Claimed Kai was taking a leave of absence. Appointed a temporary CEO. Announced a compliance committee. It was too late. People knew. People talked. investors, developers, former colleagues, even Jasper Lin, the board member from the Zoom call, flipped. He issued a statement saying he was misled, that he regretted his vote, that he supported a full investigation. Kai was being isolated. He'd underestimated everyone. Thought he could silence us with power and polish. He didn't realize that when you steal someone's company, someone's life, you don't just make an enemy. You create a mission. And I wasn't finished yet. Because there was one final piece of evidence I hadn't touched. A second recording, dated just 1 week before I was pushed out. Kai, alone, talking into his webcam, practicing a speech. I hit play. Marlowe was brilliant but unstable. We had to make the hard call. We had to protect the product. I hope he finds peace. He smiled. Pause. Rehearsed the same line again, just a little softer. Like he was writing my obituary. He wanted the world to remember me as the problem, so no one would look at the real one. But the world was looking now. And it wasn't me they saw. It was him. The Monday after the SEC subpoena dropped, I got a call I didn't expect. Ariel Fletcher, lead investor, Echelon's biggest financial backer. The same woman who hadn't returned a single message since my firing. Now she was calling me. Marlowe, she said, her voice clipped but calm, I'm retracting our stake. I know. What I didn't know, she added, was that Kai had staged your removal 6 weeks in advance. That he'd doctored quarterly reports. Or that he'd been funding a side company using our seed money. My throat went dry. He funneled investor capital into GrailPath? Yeah, she said. And now I've got my legal team dissecting the contracts. I let the silence stretch. Then she said, Can you meet with me in person? Where? Tomorrow. I'm flying to Austin. She paused. And Marlowe? I think it's time we talk about how to rebuild what he tried to kill. I hung up and stared at the screen. Rebuild? I hadn't thought that far. 4 weeks I'd been focused on survival. On getting the truth out. On proving I wasn't crazy, unstable, bitter. But now, someone with real power, someone who once believed Kai's lies, was asking me to step forward again. Not as a victim, but as a founder. And I wasn't alone. Because over the next 48 hours, something started to shift. People came out of the woodwork. Former engineers who had been quietly forced out. Vendors who had been ghosted on payments. Developers from Rivian Grid who had never spoken publicly. All with pieces of the same puzzle. And with Delaney's help, we started assembling it into a network of manipulation. At least 4 shell companies tied to Kai through aliases or proxy signers. 2 lawsuits settled quietly in 2019 and 2021, both alleging breach of contract. A deleted repo from an AI tools startup in Seattle with commit logs identical to Echelon's early architecture. He'd done it again and again. Build, trip, burn, move on. The only difference this time? He left behind a trail. And now that trail was being followed by more than just journalists. I met with Patricia Wong, a federal prosecutor from the DOJ's Financial Crimes Division. She wasn't impressed by flash. Didn't care about boardroom drama or Silicon Valley power plays. She cared about evidence. And we gave her everything. Every invoice. Every call log. The recording of Kai's mental health narrative plan. The vendor accounts. The wire transfers to GrailPath. She listened, took notes, and finally said, If he's smart, he'll turn himself in before we file the indictment. He didn't. Instead, Kai posted a 3-paragraph statement on LinkedIn. Entrepreneurship is full of hard lessons. I'm stepping away from Echelon to focus on my health and my family. I wish the company the best. No apology. No accountability. Just another dodge. But no one bought it. Because 30 minutes after he posted it, the FBI raided his condo in downtown Austin. Agents walked out with hard drives, laptops, and boxes of documents. News crews were already waiting. I watched it on TV from Sadie's apartment. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just watched. Until finally, after a long pause, she whispered, "You did it." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "We did. They arrested Kai on a Thursday. It wasn't dramatic, no drawn guns or high-speed chase. Just 3 plainclothes agents, a quiet knock on the door, and one very pale man in a tailored navy suit walking out with his wrists in cuffs. But for me? It was the sound of a building finally falling after years of creaking beams. The official charges were announced the next day. Wire fraud, securities fraud, misappropriation of investor funds, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The documents cited multiple companies, including Echelon Analytics, Grailpath Technologies, and 2 shell entities tied to Rivian Grid. He was held without bail. Flight risk. I read every page of the indictment. Slowly, quietly, sitting alone in the same cafe where I first met Delaney. The waitress refilled my coffee 3 times. I didn't touch it, because for the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't fighting anymore. I was watching. And Kai? He was the one falling. A week later, I was invited to speak at a closed-door roundtable hosted by a group of venture capitalists in New York, some of the same ones who had ignored me months earlier. I thought about saying no. But Sadie was the one who convinced me. "You don't go for them," she said. "You go for the ones who come after you. The founders who'll be in your shoes a year from now." So I went. And I told them everything. How easy it had been for someone like Kai to manipulate the system. How investors ignored red flags in favor of charisma and buzzword. How boards were quick to believe the man with the bigger bank account, not the one doing the work. And how silence almost let him get away with all of it. When I finished, the room was quiet. No one clapped. But they listened. And that was enough. Back in Austin, the Echelon board officially voted to remove Kai's name from all company asset. His equity was frozen. A special committee was formed to review the damage and restructure leadership. They asked if I'd consider returning as interim CEO. I didn't even hesitate. No, not because I didn't love what I built, but because I knew the soul of that company had changed. It would never be the same. And I wasn't the same person who had once spent nights on that office couch, dreaming about revolutionizing data modeling. I'd already done what I came to do. And then some. Instead, I took a consulting role, advising startups on founder protections, early-stage governance, and how to spot red flags before it's too late. I called the program Failsafe. One rainy Friday, a month after the indictment, I got a call from Kai's attorney. "Would you be open to settling the civil suit?" he asked. I laughed. "You mean the one where he called me unstable and accused me of corporate sabotage?" "Yes," he said. "He's revising his strategy." "I bet he is." I declined the offer. We both knew why he made the call. He was scared of discovery, of depositions, of everything else that would come out in court. He didn't want to fight anymore. He wanted to disappear. But this time, I wasn't letting him walk away clean. The criminal trial was scheduled for the fall. April, Sadie, and I were all on the witness list. Delaney's reporting had been cited in 3 separate financial oversight hearings. One senator even referenced our case during a push for greater startup accountability legislation. People were paying attention now. Real attention. Not to the lies, but to the truth. And it only cost me everything to get them to hear it. 3 months later, I stood in the back of a federal courtroom, watching Kai Donovan sit in silence as the judge read out his sentence. He wore a muted gray suit. His hair was longer. His arrogance gone. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. The judge's voice was calm, unshaken, almost clinical. "Mr. Donovan, you're sentenced to 14 years in federal prison for wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Restitution is to be paid in full to affected investors, vendors, and displaced employees." There were no gasps, no drama, just a quiet gavel tap. And then it was over. The man who had tried to erase me, who tried to sell my work and bury my name, was now just another file in the justice system. And me? I walked out of that courtroom free. Not just legally. Free from him. Back in Austin, things moved on. Sadie took a CTO role at a robotics firm in Denver. She deserved it. She'd carried half of Echelon on her back long before the world noticed. April finally returned to the tech world too, but this time on her own terms. She co-founded a startup focused on ethical compliance infrastructure. She called it Second Light. And me? I moved to a small place in Marfa. Stripped down. Quiet. No boardrooms. No sprints. No shareholder decks. Just a battered laptop and my own timeline. People still call sometimes, asking me to speak, advise, consult. I take the ones that feel honest. I ignore the ones that feel hungry. Because I've learned something. When you survive betrayal like that, real betrayal, you stop chasing applause. You start chasing clarity. A year after the trial, I got a letter. Typed. No return address. But I knew the handwriting on the envelope. It was from Kai. Inside, one page. I was wrong. I lied. And I lost everything trying to protect the one thing I didn't deserve: control. I hope you build something better. Something that lasts. K. I read it twice. Then I burned it. Because closure isn't something you receive. It's something you claim. And mine? Mine came the day I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. And finally, I had it.